So, hello everyone. I just wanted to record this quick intro to talk about a couple things. I went on Noah Samsen's stream and we just spoke about a whole host of issues, but basically, he's raising money for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. Obviously, it's a UN agency. You might have heard been referred to as UNRWA, and he's raised like an insane amount of money. He's basically doing like a marathon stream. But anyway, he just invited me on and we spoke about Palestine, we spoke about the state of left-wing YouTube, we spoke about the leftist response to Palestine, his evolution from just like a general left-wing creator to someone who focuses on Palestine, and we spoke about obviously a little bit his lawsuit from Ethan Klein and just about Ethan Klein in general. So if you guys don't know, the idea for this charity stream was that Ethan Klein is trying to sue Noah Samsen for defamation for a video that he made, and he had like a rough estimate of how much it would cost to like defend himself if they actually sued him properly, and he used that number as inspiration for the number he has, and I think he's far exceeded that right now. So I'm going to stick the link in the description to his fundraiser so you guys can go check that out. It's a long discussion. It was a really good discussion. And while this isn't strictly speaking like a proper collab, I don't really collab with many left-wing YouTubers, so please enjoy the very rare occurrence when I do.
But no, like also I was thinking, how's your brain feeling right now after streaming so long?
It's been, I don't know, last night I was talking to like FD Signifier and CJ the X at the same time after like 50 straight hours. And that was like, I
Oh,
was just sitting
okay.
there like, I'm gonna fall asleep or have some like health crisis because I'd been filming on stream and then sleeping on stream. And I was still sleeping, but it was like, once you wake up, I feel like I felt a weird pressure to like get up and start dancing for them again. And I don't know, it was a weird position to be in. I've never done that before. So but I slept fully last night and I'm feeling good, so I'm prepped and ready.
Because you're not a streamer, obviously. So
No.
like I don't stream much either. But when I stream, I think I did the US and the UK election. I did like 6 hours. Afterwards, like my brain was just so crazy and I couldn't sleep because obviously when you're just streaming, like not watching videos, you're just performing for people constantly. And it's such a like I don't even know, like Hassan's brain should be studied like one day because what that must do to you is insane. And I hate that, like I could never ever be a streamer. I think it's just like I think it's terrible for your health, to be fair.
Yeah, you're not meant to like not only like talk and perform, but like read that many messages all at once and have that going into your
Yeah.
brain while also reacting. And like, yeah, it's I when people got on him for saying that streaming is harder than whatever his former jobs, I was like, I can see why people are mad about that, but he does stream 12 hours a day, and if you've ever tried it, it's not fun. It's not for the, I guess, the weak hearted or whatever.
Yeah, like obviously, people who do this for a living, like ourselves and everything, it's very privileged position. But at the same time, there are like unique struggles that come with it, and we're not, like, I'm not gonna make a video saying, I'm sure most people in this position we've done both, so we know what like real, like, corporate work is and all that shit. So it's like you can appreciate why it's better, but there's a certain mental aspect, and that's why I quit Twitter because I think one week I had like three really viral videos and I had like four viral tweets, and I'm like, you are not meant to read this much about yourself in such a short space of time. Like it's so terrible for you. And that's when I was like, I have to come off Twitter. Like I can't keep reading all of it. And also, a lot of it is really hostile. So even if you are like confident, which I assume most creators are, people ripping the shit out of your appearance and your voice like 24/7, even if it is like drowned out by people saying nice things, you're just not meant to. People aren't meant to read that much. And I think even related to what we might talk about today, people like Ethan Klein and other people, like even Elon Musk or J.K. Rowling, I think Twitter especially fully cooks your brain, so you do become like radicalized, especially if it's from like a certain group. Because people get funny because on Blue Sky I just post about how much I hate Americans all the time.
Mhm.
Um, it's a bit of a joke, but it's because of my experience with American leftists online who have just like dogpiled me over the years, and I'm just like, it's given me like a certain perspective on them, but I'm not going to go down the route of like I hate all left-wing people, or these American leftists are representative of most American leftists. But I do seriously understand how people's brains get so fried. You become like a different person in response to like all the hatred you get, even like Anna Kasparian as well. When it's like a certain community, and there's one certain community in left-wing YouTube who loves to do this, and it's like I can understand why people even become that from being on Twitter way too much. So yeah, the main message to everyone is like switch to Blue Sky maybe and like save your mental health.
Yeah, I feel like it requires, in order to stay sane about it, even if you're seeing it all the time and like you're talking about, um to go from that to like a why I left the left arc. It's it requires some sense of like lack of principles, like lack of firmly grounded principles, obviously, but just being in the situation of like getting flooded, especially people like late in their careers. When that happens, it's usually like, oh, that's a career move. But early on, I
Yeah.
think like I'm sure when you just were starting out, or yeah, with the first time you've experienced like going viral and stuff, it's just too much information. And even though you're like logically you're supposed to say, okay, they're calling me ugly, that's irrelevant to the politics here, but it's like, okay, maybe start looking at myself in the mirror a little too long and thinking about this shit out when I'm done streaming. It's not good, but yeah, with
Yeah.
Ethan, like shoot, I forgot what you mentioned along the lines of
No, I just because
audience capture.
I made a video about him in 2021 talking about like his political evolution. And I did talk about the Israel stuff briefly, where he used to say like ages ago he was pro-Palestinian, and he's definitely got way worse. And I think part of that is, yeah, he is like a liberal Zionist or whatever, but part of it is also because he's become radicalized by the hate essentially. So he's like doubling down, just saying like loads of random shit. Like I watched your video just recently, the lawsuit one, and you played some clips of what he was saying. And that's just like it's just so insane some of the shit he was saying to Sam Cedar and Hassan. And not saying that he wouldn't always believe that, but I think the hate brings out something in people and it makes them turn into something. Like I'm not saying he was a great guy. And that's why I say like Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling, they weren't good people, but it does bring something out of you and you just become so like entrenched in like defending yourself. And that's why I think also a lot of these people, when people hold out like a hand of like my community will respond, like let's say like Destiny or something like that, they happily accept it like unquestioningly. It's like, oh, they're backing me up, so I'm gonna be on their side now. I think there's so much like, especially when you're not very bright. Like I don't think Ethan, firstly, I don't think he's very smart, but also I don't think he really actually gives a shit about, I don't think he gives a shit about Israel either. Like I don't think he cares about any of it really that much. So it's very easy to just be like, okay, now I'm being fed all this stuff by one community and they've got my back. So we're just gonna, and that's why I made a video about the Hasan Ethan debate, and I just said like, I found it pretty gross and dystopian, and not because Hassan was wrong on anything, but just what it really turned into, like this mudslinging thing about two people who just obviously can't back down because of their personal egos backing up this debate. So it's kind of like it is a weird thing to watch online as people, like being radicalized. And also, I was thinking about this because I typed this in. I don't want to cause any drama. I typed this in. So I've been on leftist YouTube like a lot longer than most people. I don't think people realize that I'm one of the older ones just because my channel's been so small. So like I obviously remember when you started. I remember when Bad Empanada had like 3K subs. And there's also I remember when Chud Logic used to be like some sort of like liberal leftist streamer. I remember that, but then I remember that scandal with like him texting like someone who was like pretty young, and then I found your video because they bring this up like it was something on Twitter. It was like your video, and I'm like, it's so insane to watch this over the span of like 5 or 6 years of like all these people become like a certain way. Even someone like Destiny, and we see like the JonTron stuff. You go back and he's like calling JonTron like this Nazi, and JonTron is being a Nazi, but it's like Destiny's like you view him now, you're like you would agree with like 90% of what he's saying now. So it's just such a wild thing to be a creator online and watch all these people just completely fall off the deep end. And I do think, yeah, a lot of them are terrible people, but I think audience capture and also backlash makes these people far worse than they probably would be if they didn't get that.
Yeah, backlash, being surrounded by some kind of audience that's backing you up, and then what you mentioned about the kind of creator alliances where it's like, oh, if I can talk to someone and get some kind of information from them strictly for the purpose of like getting somebody's ass and making a big video about it and getting a lot of views, because my
Yeah.
audience also doesn't like this person now that I've said that I don't like them. It's just this crazy combination of like personal ego, material interests, and maybe some like surface level engagement with politics, or at least through the medium or the window of having a debate over Israel Palestine, and then it immediately turns that way. And yeah, it's like it feels horrific to watch. And I like when you release that video, I was like, okay, thank God someone immediately is saying what I'm thinking, and hopefully a lot of other people are thinking, which is that this should not be how, like, this issue is so serious, and so it's just the Holocaust of our time that we're watching.
Yeah.
And yet this is how we're going, this is what we're gonna how we're going to approach the topic, or what we're gonna, we're gonna use that framing to just argue with each other online. It's just super gross. And also and I feel like I have my own reservations about leaning into that to sort of invert it. But also, yeah, it's like watching it unfold and watching people, like watching I think it was like an early like loner box called into Ethan Klein's show, and he gave him all these talking points to basically delegitimize violent resistance, with the example of South Africa. And a lot of it was like kind of misinformed, but it was something that Ethan was immediately able to take, and you saw him use this talking point over and over again. And then you saw him in the debate looking down at his computer, and then he'd look up and then give a talking point that was not even related, as a way to like get somebody. And that entire kind of original thing stems from like October 7th. Destiny just kind of wanted to become a Zionist because Hasan wasn't one, and it's like they don't like each other. That's the vibe I got from it. And it's like, yeah, it's super, it's very not serious, but I know there are a lot of people, and I would like include you in this sort of group that have remained like principled about these things. And before whatever drama happens and after whatever drama happens, like you might cover the drama, but it's always, I guess, you bring it back to a certain place that I think is important. Bad Empanada is another person where I'm like, okay, I don't know, did you coin the term the Loli-Left about a certain community? Because that, if you did, that's amazing. I mean, regardless.
That was me, because like I said, I tweet a lot about how much I hate American left. Okay, if we're gonna talk about this, I have always hated Vosh, like always hated him. But his influence on the left-wing community, I saw him come out of nowhere and like hijack it all, and they just became the worst. Like the most hate I get online is from them. So I started calling them the Loli-Left, because what I mean by that is because they all follow him, like pro NATO, pro US imperialism without realizing it. So it's just like, yeah, I like that term, because it's kind of like he outed himself. I could go off on a like how I actually feel about that stuff. Like I legitimately think, all I'll say is you wouldn't trust him around your younger relatives, and I'm not going to go any further than that, because I could go off on a whole thing about that, and how like even people moving on from that is just insane. But he brought that over to the left. I saw that in real time, where suddenly it just becomes this insane mob mentality. Like if you remember the Professor Flowers stuff, he was calling like black nationalism, like Nazism, and he was so uninformed about what he was saying. And it was just insane to watch this like take over. And that's why I'm grateful for Hasan in some ways, because I think their trajectories, they're kind of similar. Because Hasan wasn't a streamer when I started making videos, but he was on TYT obviously. And then I don't know if Vosh was a streamer first, but Hasan like took over, and why I really appreciate him. I had my problems with him. That's how I think he became aware of me in the first place, because I made a whole video criticizing like his views on like consumer capitalism and stuff. But because he actually knows what he's talking about, and he does engage with these things from like an actual left wing perspective, it just made, and because of the downfall of the Loli-Left, it's just made the left generally such a better place to exist in. And also, like with your content as well, because you're saying stuff about mine. What I really appreciate about your stuff is you fit into this category of leftist content creator, which isn't like myself, because like for various different reasons, I upload like 3 or 4 times a week. But you make like these like very research videos, or like back in the day. I'm not saying this because they're bad, but it was like you made these videos on these topics that were very like, you could understand why they're popular and stuff, but then you pivoted obviously to a lot of your Israel content.
Oh, I hate it. Yeah, I hated those videos. now looking back.
No,
Just
they're
it's
good,
slop,
but why
pure
they,
slop
they
a lot of times.
it's not slop, but it's like Curtis Connor's videos are like, they're funny, and that's why they're good videos rather than like the subject matter is just like the most engaging thing, because your videos are obviously were always good, but like someone put this in the chat before I came on, like H Bomber guy only donated to stuff because the Kavernacle called him out and stuff, and why I appreciate your pivot so much, and we can talk about like why you even did this, is because you are in a category in my head. It's like FD Signifier, you, a couple others who do these like really good leftist like video essays, but like a lot of people, and I still think this is a problem. A lot of leftist video essayists have barely said anything about Palestine at all, and that's why like H Bomber guy put out something when it started saying like I don't know about enough to talk about this, and I was just calling him like a to start with. But then I was just like, there's lots of, and I'm not going to say this on this stream because I know people will obviously, there's lots of people watching this and lots of people who would know who I'm talking about. But there are lots of people, and still to this day, I think have not used their platform to help at all. And I think a lot of people often ride the coattails of people like yourself by association to be like, oh, they're actually very pro-Palestinian. I don't think there's a lot of people who exist in this ecosystem. I don't think are actually pro-Palestinian in like in a major way. I think they have stayed silent for a variety of reasons, but like I don't know if you felt this as well. Like the first year, I couldn't believe at how little some people spoke about it, and it feels like only now, with the overwhelming like culture of, what we're seeing, like you're saying, it is like the Holocaust of our times. You can't ignore it, but like I was super disappointed, and that's why obviously I was saying to you, I appreciate how you've changed your channel into like making all this content, and obviously what you're doing now is amazing. Like how much money you're raising for this, and like you were saying, taking the drama slop and turning it into something like that's actually important. Like I wouldn't say anyone would say to you, your videos on these YouTubers is actually any sort of drama, because when you actually watch them, you barely talk about them. It's just like a really like good like breakdown with the information about the actual issue rather than overly focusing on the personalities. But I feel like in an ecosystem, it's either people focus way too much on the interpersonal drama, or lots of people don't want to hurt their standing by delving into this like controversial subject. And there's some people, again, I'm not going to name anyone, some people have spoke about leftist anti-Semitism while not talking about Palestine. So, which I think is absolutely insane. But that's what I mean. Like, because of BreadTube being like a vague collective of various different voices, we all get lumped in together. Where it's like the actual people doing the work of like, actually educating people on these issues is like you, Hasan, and Empanada. I wouldn't put myself necessarily in that. I obviously I've made so many videos about Israel and Palestine, but like it's a bit different because my videos are more like, I make them in a day or whatever. It's not like heavily researched, where you guys actually do this good work. So that's the one thing I will say. Like I'm glad there are like bigger voices now like yourself and Hasan and some others that are really like helping change the conversation. And even if you do use this drama slop, it is to like a good purpose. I would just say, and I know people hated when I said this in my comments, but like the Hasan live stream was just, for me, that was a step too far. But that's the only like major criticism I'd have of anything like to do with you guys. Not that you're associated with that, but like just
Oh no,
the whole
yeah.
Ethan Klein thing.
Yeah, I think like that debate or conversation or whatever specifically is like very emblematic of like the reason certain relationships form if they're based on some type of content relationship or production relationship, and then maybe you become friends and have certain feelings about someone. Those feelings are going to usurp whatever politics you might disagree with them on. Obviously they disagree completely, but the charitability that was granted to even go on and have that conversation, I felt that in October. I wrote a video, a long one, about all of what was happening with the campaign against Twitch being anti-Semitic and the types of things that were being boosted by Ethan, because he was sort of the main proponent of that outside of this like echo chamber of streamers. And I wrote this video, but it was far more like, I don't actually know if this guy like believes this stuff or if he's just dumb or if he just has emotional propagandized ties, and those are all, I think, somewhat true. But over time, and even before that, probably I should have realized that like certain people are motivated to not change and motivated to dig their heels in and not listen. And I think Hasan, probably with his former friendship when he's brought up or he's called him like a friend, brought up these like instances where he's like, I think Ethan has some form of humanity, and I'm like, I get that as a person to person thing, but then as a political thing, that's just not like, it has to kind of be. I don't know. It was a good example of how that happens with the two of them, and I don't think, I think Hasan did probably as best as he could, but it's still this like I guess coming into YouTube, like the reasons why we are able to do what we are able to do is from old bread tube, kind of like it's the in terms of the media ecosystem, um
Yeah.
creating a structure of, oh, this is actually okay to talk about, just like being extremely conservative is insane, and like we should be able to do that on YouTube because YouTube is so conservative and anti SJW and all this. And that like laid the groundwork in a lot of ways for how the space has like grown. But ultimately, if those politics are grounded in anti-right or like anti-conservatism, you don't necessarily have to be super principled and super engaged and apply that principle over time to things that don't just counter the right, but they actually build up and focus on a perspective from the left, like about Israel Palestine, like just talking about Israel Palestine, sharing their stories. Even though that's still anti-right in a way, critiquing Zionism or whatever, it's still the evolution of that happening. You can see how that happens because people are, you see a video on YouTube and you're like, oh, I kind of want to make something like that, and you make it, and it's going in for me. That's how it was. It was like, oh, I kind of like this, and I want to make a video like this, rather than some, firmly grounded politics of growing up in a political household and having experiences that shape my views of like race, class, or gender. Like I'm a straight white dude from like an upper middle class family. That's like, there's no material ties there. It has to be something that I am learning about through osmosis, and that means it's never going to be as firm. And I talk to a lot of people that I do think are very principled about their politics, and most of the time they say, they grew up in political households or they've been always engaged with it from young ages, and that those are usually the type of people that over time stand firm in their content. I think you're one of them. I don't know if you've talked about that before, growing up in a political household or having a political sort of reckoning early on in your life. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's
I'll talk about mine, but because I'll tell the whole story. But why don't you tell me? Because I was interested in your stuff, because obviously you became like a left wing YouTuber with a certain style of content, which was kind of content I make as well. Like, anti no fap I saw that video today and I was like, I made a video on that back in the day. So
Yeah.
loads of that stuff like I've also covered. But then it's like I said, so many people like yourself just haven't made videos about Palestine. So then I'm interested, like, why, like, talk about maybe, if you want, like your upbringing and how you became like left, and then suddenly now you're like this massive like pro-Palestinian content creator. It's just like an interesting pivot, but also one you didn't actually have to even make. Like, if you were just focused on being like in some sort of e-celeb, like it has helped you in a way, but like doing that content, like you weren't going into it thinking, oh, I can't wait to make this, it's gonna do really well views wise, because it doesn't. And a lot of that stuff is so controversial. All the normie libs who subscribe to you based on your nofap video are probably gonna hate you for what you talk about. So I'm interested in like even your upbringing, but everything that affected like that kind of pivot into like more serious content, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I hadn't, I think, made a standalone video about Israel Palestine before October 7th, which is a cynical thing that often gets mentioned, like, oh, you didn't care about this before October 7th. And I'm kind of like, I mean, it's not that I didn't care, it's that this thing, like most people, was not even on their radar. And October 7th
Yeah.
changed that. And that's part of, I think, I guess, Israel's response to October 7th, right? Where, when you see what's happening, I think for a lot of people, it's changed them forever and made them, I have no problem saying that this is a cause and a pursuit of justice for what's happening that I'm like potentially willing to spend my life doing, at least, in part with other sort of projects in that vein. But yeah, I guess at the time, I was also frustrated with feeling like being a part of a YouTube ecosystem that's just like, here's a thing that's entertaining you and go about your day, specifically under the auspices of, anti-misogyny or anti-racism. Like I did a video about the Vosh Professor Flowers debate, and I remember thinking like, oh, I saw this thing that happened. I felt like what this guy did to this person was really fucked up, and it just felt wrong. And like I don't know how I'm gonna say something about this, but I feel like it. I feel the need to. But I remember during and after feeling like this thing happened on the internet, and I said what I wanted to say about it, but it was also, I remember I shared like the video to my dad because he had asked what I was working on, and he was kind of just like, I don't know how any of this relates to the real world at all. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's correct. And it took hearing that or thinking that over time enough times to say like, what are any of us doing here if we're talking about politics in this way, rather than, if I will never behoove like an entertainer, Curtis Connor type, if they're going to make videos to entertain people strictly, even if they do have some elements of like anti-misogyny. Usually if it's a guy just being like women shouldn't vote, then it's like, okay, that's an easy video to make, and somehow, if he makes it in a funny way, that's fine. But when it comes to political content, it's like, oh, there's a serious conflict of or I don't know if conflict is the right word, but barrier to genuine engagement that is developed in the mind of someone that's trying to make content and be successful at it. Trying to, I guess, appeal to an audience of people that, once you built up an audience capture, as you mentioned, it's like, okay, well, do I want to talk about Palestine? I mean, I don't know what the click-through rate will be like on a video that's about something so serious, or I don't know. I could just do a Trump video and people that's relevant to the U.S. and it's closer, and most people don't have ties to Israel Palestine, so why does it really matter? And I don't know. I mean, to me that's like, I can't conceive of that as anything other than disgusting, given what I and a lot of people have been exposed to over the past 2 years, right? It's like I can no longer understand that, but growing up, I wouldn't have had any real desire to talk about this because I wasn't that political, and I was kind of like, yeah, Obama seems cool, whatever. I remember on my, I don't know what birthday it was, but Obama got elected, and it was kind of like, oh, that's cool, black president, sounds good. I don't really know what's
You'd have
going
been
on.
like
But then,
10. I was like 12.
yeah,
I
just
think you're 27. You're 27, aren't you?
yeah, I'm 27. Yeah, you're 29.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
I looked you up because I thought you were Canadian, so I just checking where you're from. So I just saw your birthday.
yeah. On Wikitubia or
Yeah,
YouTube
something like
Wiki.
that.
That YouTube Wiki page is really, I remember it being very mean, or like it's like Chud Logic wrote it or something. It seemed like there was weird comments, but they might have
Yeah,
changed it.
that's the types of people who be writing that stuff.
Yeah, totally. And I guess
Sorry, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh no, you're good.
Okay.
Hold on a sec. Hey, my cat sleeps on. I'm gonna just take her out. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, sure. This is now my stream.
She sleeps on my PC, and her paws stay right by the power button. I need to figure out some way to make that not happen. Okay, yeah. As far as like pivoting content, I don't know. I wasn't really sure how that would go or what would result from it. Even though I knew it's like I obviously I knew people were talking about this thing in some places on the internet, at least, like on Twitter. Like I'm following all these journalists, I'm following all these people that are not going on CNN or MSNBC, but there's traction, and there's I guess I don't know what the word is, like engagement around this issue because it's so severe, and people are like, oh, this is the only way we can learn about this is by following a journalist in Gaza on his Twitter account, and then seeing 2 months later that he had been killed. Like this is insane what's happening. And so I guess understanding that like, oh, there's people that want to hear about this and want to, and there's also people that need to and aren't hearing about it. And so there is a kind of feeling that like it's not like I'm talking about an issue that um isn't important to a lot of people. But also it doesn't get talked about a lot on YouTube. And so yeah, I don't remember what my first few videos on it were, but I think early on I did a similar thing as what I've been doing, which is like taking some TikTok trend that had happened, like Israelis being just absolutely racist as shit as they typically, are, and then building off of that into talking about it more broadly. And I think I was still pretty
I do the same thing.
yeah. I mean, it's yeah, like IDF. I've seen your videos on the IDF soldier thirst traps and stuff, and it's like this is, it's a thing that most people can, in the YouTube landscape, latch onto. Is like, oh, crazy stuff happened on a TikTok. Let's see what it is. But it's like literal, genocide promotion on TikTok. Like this is a very serious and like historically significant thing. But I felt I don't know if it's the need. I was just compelled to, given how the ecosystem works, make it in that framing. But then over time, you're like, oh, like, I don't know. Yeah, it just feels like how can you talk or think about anything else when this is happening? And then yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know. In like mentally, there's no going back, and like over the last like year especially, it's like I am like the type of video I would have made before doesn't even cross my mind, or if it does, I'm like, why? Like there's no point in doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I don't remember the question. If that answers your question.
I was just basically asking like your trajectory from. So you're just basically saying you're like apolitical. Apolitical. I wouldn't say that, but like you're not someone who doesn't care so much about politics, and then through becoming like this creator, and obviously getting into this ecosystem, you start caring, and then something so terrible happens, you can't stay silent, basically. And then I think that's the pivot.
Yeah, totally. I think there was an in between period where it was like Bernie 2016, Bernie 2020, being on Twitter during that and seeing like, I think it was probably Chapo Trap House, and being like, oh, these people are funny, and like they're talking about things that sound very rational, like people having the basic necessities to live, and people that have a billion times more than that, not like withholding that from people. And it's very elementary understanding, but basic concepts, that all things that I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's right. And then 4 years later, 5 years later, I'm like, that was right, and it is still correct. Now I just have a little more thorough understanding of it. And online, like left Twitter, and I guess just mostly left Twitter, and then discovering left YouTube. But yeah, because around that time it was like I forget what I was saying, but yeah, there was that intermediary period where it was less content and more like what I'm reading, and part of that is a lot of like, I think, radlib tendencies that I had and perhaps still have in my mind were stemmed from like, I don't know, Twitter, identity politics, cancel culture, things that 5 years ago, if I'd heard someone talking about it like this, I'd be like, oh, you're Jordan Peterson. But over time, what we've discovered is that identity politics that's been bastardized from its original conceptions in academia can also be weaponized by Zionists when it comes to like anti-Semitism on campuses or whatever. I
called it woke fascism, basically, is what I've called it. But
exactly.
But you're right, because if you hear that in 2018, you think I'm some crazy conservative?
Totally, yeah. And that's a part of the political evolution, not just with me, obviously, like just everyone that's paying attention. It's like we have to reckon with that fact that something that a lot of people held really firmly, and there was a lot of overlap from people who I still think are principled about this, and people who were driving this sort of thing that made it so that I guess irrational engagement with politics based on how people are feeling about things, based on a viral tweet says something about a microaggression, and I'm like, that sounds like it makes sense, I guess, and that's probably important. And it's not like it's not there's no truth to it, but then over time the actual material reality usurps that as like what needs to be talked about and what we need to be thinking about. Yeah.
people talk about white privilege, and it's like I'm perfectly willing to entertain like if you're thinking that if this was a black guy, he wouldn't be treated like this. I'm perfectly willing to entertain that conversation. It should not be the conversation we're having when this guy has done what he's done. The conversation should be about economic reality and healthcare, not identity. And I tweeted, did Luigi Mangione say he apologizes for doing this on stolen land, like before he shot the guy? Because it's like, is that what liberals want? Like, you want him to acknowledge all this identity stuff because he was just he's a random like normie center right guy, right? Who was radicalized by the healthcare system, and it's like, so let's focus on that and not focus on maybe like he might have been a misogynist. It's like this great, but a lot of people on left wing Twitter and left wing YouTube, they would more want to talk about that, and like he's not all this stuff to do with identity. I feel like it's an American thing. I can talk about that a bit when I talk about my own evolution, but I think it's an Americanism that has really infected a lot of Western politics, like this over focus on liberal identity, over class, which the UK has its good things with class and bad things with class, but it's very different to like Americans generally.
Yeah. What do you think that I guess stems from?
Oh, it's just I don't even want to start a conversation. Just like Americans are like classism is so entrenched in the UK. I can talk about my own political evolution if you want in regards to this. Um,
Yeah, please do.
if that's right. Okay, so our political backgrounds maybe aren't so different. That I came from a middle class family. You were saying upper middle class. It's probably fairly comparable. The one thing, obviously, I talk about this a lot. I talk about it in a recent video. My grandparents were all Irish migrants to England. My mum's parents were very working class. She was one of 10, like grew up poor and stuff. Obviously, you grow up Irish as well, and you don't realize until later that is a difference. Like, it's very weird to think. Like, obviously, everyone hearing me in the chat right now, probably like 90% Americans. And I said in my video, when I say like I feel different from English people, you probably think I'm crazy. There is a difference between like Anglo or London Irish and like English. So growing up, like with yourself, my parents are not that political, right? My dad, he went to university. He's smart and everything, but there was no one telling me like socialism is great, and that's why my politics have been were weird growing up. So I've always loved history. That's something that's fed to you in school. The UK just loves World War Two and World War One. There are war memorials, not because we love it, because so many people died everywhere. Like I could probably say there's like 5 near me right now. I've driven all around the country, all around Scotland. There are war memorials everywhere because so many people died. And in that, this plays into the Israel stuff. You're fed a narrative about history that is so much centered on World War One and World War Two, and you learn like so much about the Holocaust, and it's really drummed into your head. So then, when you hear about the Israel stuff, you're always told, well, and it is partly true, that is because of the result of the Holocaust, but you're not taught about the Zionist stuff. You're just taught about like the Jews went there because no one, the Holocaust happened and everything was really bad and they had to go there, right? So that's how you're taught in the UK. So growing up, obviously like yourself, I grew up in the war on terror, but I loved history and I loved politics. So I would get up, this is in primary school, I would watch the news, and I remember specifically watching like Israel's war with Lebanon, watching Afghanistan, watching Iraq, all at once. And for a Western media frame of Muslims are doing this against like, and obviously 9/11 happened and 7/7 happened, which for people who don't know, in America is when the tubes are bombed in London and the buses. So I have all this stuff, and like it makes you, obviously I found out later, prejudice against Muslims basically. So growing up, loved history all through school, and then I was always told I wasn't that good at school, even though I thought I was. And then when I was a bit older, I did actually do really well in school, specifically in history and geography. And my first election, like I've actually spoke about this. My first election was in 2015, and it's my first year of uni. So I went and studied history at uni, and I voted Conservative in my first election. Weirdly enough, the MP I elected was a doctor in Gaza. Is a
Mm,
Conservative MP. So it was very
mm,
weird because I remember saying that to people like, oh, like she treated leprosy in like Congo and like she was a doctor in Gaza. To be fair, she wasn't like what you see today. It was a different generation of Tory MPs and stuff. But I still voted for that, and at the same time, I supported Bernie Sanders. So
mm,
I describe my politics as left wing contrarian because the reason I voted Tory partly because I knew so many people who were socialists, and I was thinking, I've said this before, I was too smart for my own good. So I'm thinking, you guys do not understand politics. You don't understand the world. So I'm voting for the sensible people who know what they're talking about. And like I said, with the UK class system, the Tories, unlike Republicans, they prioritize education so highly in terms of like the best universities, obviously Oxford and Cambridge, like two of the best in the world. All the Tories go there. So it's kind of like this whole thing of like, they're like the smart people. So I vote for them because I'm like, oh, these people understand politics. Ed Miliband, he's just one of those like lefty blah blah blah. But again, and I love Che Guevara. I love Che Guevara, like Bernie Sanders, and I voted for the Tories. So like that's why sometimes I think you can't give up on certain people. But anyway, moving on from that, in my second year of university, I did Islamicism as a module, and this is in regard to the Israel stuff. I was taught by an atheist Iranian who fled the revolution. And if you guys have seen in the news recently, there's a lot of prominent Iranians who are atheists who fled the new regime who are pro-Israel because they view Islamicism as like the greatest threat to everything. So I was taught Islamicism through that lens. So all the stuff I already spoke about, prejudice against Muslims because of brainwashing by Western media, and then I get taught Islamicism by a brown guy who's an ex-Muslim and an atheist through a certain lens. So I learn about Hamas, I learn about Israel, I learn about all this stuff, and I have a certain view. I've spoken about this in the video. I was pro-Israel, and also I was an atheist as well because I was raised Catholic. So I was an atheist. Israel, in my mind back then, was more secular, and they're being attacked by radical extremists. I'm sounding like Ethan Klein right now. And it's part of this global like Muslim movement, like Wahhabism, Salafism, stuff like that. And I believe all these things. And then thankfully, what happened is, and like for many of you guys, and like you were saying, Donald Trump and Brexit really helped break me out of the mold, because what happened is, I guess I was a British exceptionalist thinking Britain is not like America. Even our Conservative Party supports the NHS. Like, we're better than America, and our politics are better, and we've moved past like racism, xenophobia. Then Brexit comes along, and like the propaganda on the radio is like, if we don't leave the EU, 100 million Muslims from Turkey are going to come flooding into England because they're joining the EU next, apparently. So in my head, I'm like, as someone who's too smart for my own good, I'm like, that is so wrong. Like, it's just factually wrong. It's not happening. But then the xenophobia in this country just ramped up so highly. Also, what happened at that time too with Israel, Jeremy Corbyn, he obviously got elected leader. He started being called an anti-Semite. And I remember one of the earliest articles I wrote for my university politics paper was I defended Jeremy Corbyn, and I hated him, by the way, at this time. I defended him because he compared Israel to ISIS, and I wrote a whole article defending him. And this is, again, someone who's a contrarian leftist, voted for the Tories. I said, it's not wrong to say this, because he basically said, not all Muslims support ISIS, not all Jews support Israel. And I wrote this defending him. So that was at the start of my like anti-Zionist arc. And then so the Brexit thing radicalized me. It also made me embrace my Irish identity a lot more. I found out one of my relatives had led the Easter Rising, which is the first, like, not the first, it's the major uprising that leads to the independent Republic of Ireland. And he was like this very famous guy. And I started just thinking more about my identity and my Irishness. And I was like, this Brexit shit just reminds me that this happened to my grandma. So that made me move firmly left. And by 2017, when Jeremy Corbyn nearly won an election, I was firmly left wing by then. And I don't know if I hated Israel yet, but like I was pretty anti-Israel as well. And that is also the year I did my master's degree in international relations, and I also started my YouTube channel in 2017 as well. And what I was going to say is, there was not too much, is that I just became more and more left wing, but I had a really good professor. People can look him up because he's wrote some good books, and he has like a presence on like The Guardian and stuff. He's called David Waring, and he was the first Marxist professor I'd ever encountered in university, going against the narrative. I'd always had pretty centrist and conservative ones. And he taught me a module on both the Middle East and Trump's foreign policy in his first term. And like, it was just the last thing I needed to put the pieces in my head together. Because I always say to people, humanities degrees are great for learning about stuff. Like, you need the political science theory, and that's just with anything. You need the theory to understand your knowledge, because again, I was too smart for my own good. Like then I get this Marxist political theory like given to me by my professor, and I put it all together, and I'm like, I put all the pieces together, and then firmly now I'm like, I just am a communist now, and this is I must be like 23 or something, and yeah, just from there, like make my YouTube videos. I think my earliest one on Israel was in 2019. I was talking about like evangelical support for Israel being insane and anti-Semitic, and then I have been calling it a genocide. I remember in my videos I was calling it a genocide or arguing it was a genocide since like 2021. Because anyone who's followed my channel for a long time knows I've always like pretty much since I've become big, I've always made videos like really critical of Israel. I made a video about like IDF cat ear soldiers and shit like that, like we were talking about before, like packaging it in a certain way. So and also it combines nicely with the Irishness as you learn more about your own history, how we were subject to colonization, just like the Palestinians, and there's just a shared struggle there. It just all put in my like I'd say by 2020 I was an anti-Zionist. Like just like I'd happily say that on YouTube. And one more thing I will say as well, another life experience at my old work. I was a journalist for like a pharmaceutical business paper. I wrote an article about how Israel were blocking ventilators from getting into Gaza. There are these organizations that go around monitoring the press, and if they think you're anti-Semitic, they'll write an article about it, and they message my boss that I was a racist. And obviously, like even you were saying, you don't really know what to think about Israel at certain points. This was before even the 2021 attacks on Gaza, right? So it wasn't in the news loads. So I get my boss getting this message that my article is like anti-Semitic. It's like it's racist against Jewish people. And obviously the injustice I felt at that, I'm like, holy shit, like how is this even real right now? And now that is the type of shit, Jeremy Corbyn and that's everywhere now. That's just everything. It's people being harassed as anti-Semites for like the mildest criticism of Zionism. So yeah, from that point, I was just like so radicalized against Israel. And I think I tweeted on October 7th, like basically it was going to be a genocide. Like I basically knew what was going to happen because after the attacks, you just knew they were going to use it as just an excuse to do this finally. Because we saw in 2021, they kind of wanted to do it, but it just wasn't severe enough. And now after this attacks, like 2,000 people dead or whatever, suddenly they're like, oh my God, this is the chance we've been waiting for to like literally take Gaza. So like yourself, I have been radicalized even more and depressed even more, but like that is basically my political evolution into anti-Zionism, and why I think it's important to have these conversations and not act like everyone was like anti-Israel from birth, because I feel like leftists sometimes are very scared to admit that you might have been racist, you might have been prejudiced, you might have been pro-Israel. Doesn't make you a bad person. You're a victim of brainwashing that is literally in place to make you support terrible things like that. And I was one of those people, and I thought I was too smart to be brainwashed. And like I was smart in some ways, but not smart enough. And I say all that because even when we're looking at someone like Ethan Klein, you have to think about, not to absolve what he's saying, but you have to think about where that person's come from and what his bubble is. Like, why does he speak like that? Even though I think he doesn't really give a shit, it's because his upbringing, and we heard Seth Rogen talk about this with when he even went to Hebrew school, what they tell you about Israel, it's just a desert that they made into like a great country, and you take all of that, and then also another part is Ethan Klein has to admit he went to Israel and he liked it so much he became a citizen. So he went to an apartheid state and said, "Fuck yeah, let me live here," and he has to go out to everyone, and he has to say that he was wrong about that, and he has to like basically say shit about like his entire wife's family. So I'm saying all that because like the reason he's becoming so hostile is like he literally kind of has to renounce his entire identity, and I think it's important that when we talk about people like Ethan Klein, obviously I think he's a terrible person, but it's kind of like in the context of you have to think about how everyone is brainwashed to accept these things as like normal, and the status quo is normal. And what I said before is this has been going on since 9/11, this dehumanization of Muslims and accepting hundreds of thousands of Muslim deaths and even millions to prepare us for this moment where now Muslim, like stereotypical Muslim, is the new Jew. And it's like, it's so easy and acceptable to dehumanize all of them. And like, thankfully, like we've been saying the whole video, we have now a lot of people to push back against that. But it's basically fascism is coming to all our countries through Islamophobia and racism against people deemed to be like Muslims. And again, like it's important now that people who were brainwashed into this, especially older people like ourselves, maybe like for Gen Z to see it, is like just talk about how this worked and why it worked. And like we've been talking about recently as well, like the liberal identity politics is what sells you. Atheists, secular, LGBT, women in the military, that sells you in it because it's compatible with our brainwashing and liberalism. Then you have to again become like a socialist Marxist to realize about like the class struggle of you are far closer, even as tragic as it is, to being a Palestinian in his current situation than you are to being like, say, a billionaire or someone in the government of Israel or the UK or whatever. And it's more like focusing on the class issue of this is all about capitalism and imperialism, and it's being like liberal identity politics is the justification for fascism now. Sorry if that was way too long, but I just wanted to like make it clear to everyone, like, you know, this is a thing that's been put in place for a long time to brainwash us all into supporting a certain thing. And it's not brainwashing in the sense that people be like, oh, you're an anti-Semite, you're talking about Jews brainwashing people. It's not even about Jewish people. It's literally about foreign governments, the US government, UK government. They want Israel to exist for different reasons. And they brainwash the people to support it no matter what. And that's what we're seeing. Like, only now, oh, there might be sanctions on Israel because 14,000 children might die in 2 days now. That's where the limit is now. But how many people would you say is died? Like 200,000 probably is maybe like even a low estimate of how many people have been killed. And that wasn't enough. We just had to sit through that. I would say maybe even more. Like after, you know, maybe in 5 years' time when, you know, people have died from various other illnesses and injuries. So yeah, that was my journey. So a bit different to yours, but I think, like I said, I was too smart for my own good. I was a contrarian. I supported Israel, and I had to go through my own political evolution to really come out the other side as, you know, someone who's been making anti-Zionist content for a long time and has no problem saying it. We have to deconstruct the whole ideology of Zionism from its more socialist interpretation in the 1940s to the more religious interpretation of like the 1960s to now, and even to like the ethno-nationalist ones as well. Like there's different strains of Zionism, and it's important to tackle them all and not become so sensitive about like, oh, maybe I'll offend someone's feelings. So yeah, that's basically my big political evolution. On that as well, like I wanted to say, with like the Ethan Klein stuff and the SlopTubers, just to pivot away, do you think they'll ever stop? Like we're talking about like being conditioned and all this stuff. Do you think they'll ever stop being the way they are, even, or will they ever admit they're wrong?
I think it's so strongly in opposition to their material interests, and I think they're kind of dumb babies that I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
It would take, I don't even know what it would take, but I think in terms of trying to make that happen, I think it feels like we're well beyond the scope of possibility for them. I think there's value in potentially capturing some audience in the middle, and I've seen a lot of people, you know, an old H3 fan that ends up being like H3 fans that say, oh yeah, this guy's like a Zionist, this is wrong, or even just looking into it or watching a video and learning about it because their favorite YouTuber's getting talked about, and then leaving that community because it's like, oh, it's mostly just Zionists now, or people that don't understand or care. But that process for the actual creators themselves, I don't know. Maybe that's a cynical view and a nihilistic view, because like you're saying, you yourself had those feelings given the propaganda and brainwashing that we've all experienced, like in the West. But I think the what I am hesitant to grant to them is that you weren't making money by, you know, holding firm in your beliefs on the internet and appearing strong, trying to appear strong and smart, and trying to appear like, you know, you're never wrong and you own people in debates. But these people are, and looking to them to think that they'd change. I could be wrong about that, and I could be. There could be, do you think there's, I guess, like value and potential in pursuing that, like not just for the audience, but for the creators themselves in terms of like talking to each other about it? I mean, we saw what the debate was, right? And with Hasan and Ethan, them being so engrossed in their own, Ethan, in that case, being so engrossed in this propaganda and so clearly using it for his own personal stuff. I think it's not a serious place to look. And that's, I mean, looking elsewhere is important, but I understand the desire to make that happen. I'm nihilistic about these people because it feels like there's too much they want to make money and they want to grow, and it just those things don't like coincide with ideological development. Um,
Yeah.
and,
I think it's like it's a spectrum really between like
mm,
Ethan Klein. I think is a very interesting case, but a harder case because even like you saw in the debate with Hassan, it's just so much about, well, neither of us can leave because we can't be seen as the one to back down. So it's like, how is that productive to an actual conversation of like, I can't stop talking first because I'll lose, like and even like you see like Norman, like Norm Finkelstein with Destiny, and even stuff that's more moderated. Like I do understand like there has to be an element of like good faith of like I am gonna change my opinion based on what you've argued. But I think online that is pretty much impossible because you're gonna have to admit you're wrong. And you're gonna have to go into a conversation, like thousands of people are gonna watch. You're gonna have to come away being like, that person was right and I was wrong. It's just never gonna happen. It doesn't matter how much more you know. And you saw the Hassan debate and the Ethan stuff. Hassan knows what he's talking about, but it's pointless. Like he's like saying all these facts, it doesn't matter. Like it's not going to change anyone's mind. So it is like I get what you're saying. It feels like a bit fruitless, and at the same time, is like people just in these, especially I think there's something to be said about streamer personalities and their fan bases because if you are a fan of a streamer, that means you have enough time to watch like multiple hours regularly of a guy streaming stuff. And I in my head, someone's like, "Who the fuck?" Like someone told me, people were telling me they watched the whole 5 hour stream. And I'm like, why the fuck would you do that? Like, have you got nothing better to do in your life than that? And but
yeah, they
that's
called
what I
it
mean. Like, if you're
the
such,
Super Bowl for the unemployed.
yeah, and I was like, I can't even unless you're in college and like maybe you're writing a paper and you have it on the side. I do not understand who the fuck has, and I guess that is a lot of people. I do not understand who the fuck has time to watch that stuff. And but that's what I mean. Like, they're so invested. So I don't really know what the kind of like. I mean, one thing I will say, I don't know. I want to get your perspective on this. How much, obviously, you're making these videos because of your personal feelings towards it. How much do you do it with any goal in mind of I'm going to change something? Obviously, like you're raising like loads of money like this week, and it's like really great and stuff, and that actually is material change. Material change. I mean, wouldn't necessarily change anything, but it's obviously like a big deal to raise so much money. But like, do you have a goal in mind of like I want to make this to do this, or hopefully for my videos this will happen, or is it just like my own personal expression of this is terrible and I have to speak about it?
Yeah, initially it was that it was this is so fucked up that why isn't everyone talking about this? But over time, given the feedback that I was getting was there was both positive and negative feedback. Positive from people that um, wanted to hear more about this and were so like I guess there was some form of solidarity, at least, in their education and their thoughts and feelings with this being talked about in a way that, wasn't genocidal, right? Or that was anti-Zionist. And then there was a negative, I guess, version of that, which is not negative, but it's a different crowd of people that's um, even if I'm just going through and showing footage of Israelis being racist and then tying that to broader Israeli society, um, that might seem like just a small thing, but unearthing the Zionist project requires exploration into what it actually is and what it results in. And there's so much propaganda that the simple act of presenting the truth and the reality and just breaking down like, okay, you hear all these things about how you can't understand Israel unless you live there, or this is about self-defense, when like I was just reading a BBC article and they still quote Hamas run
Yeah.
health ministry, and they still quote Netanyahu saying uncritically saying this is a defensive war, right? And you see that, and then you recognize, oh, like uh it feels very, it almost feels like I don't want to say it's like easy because it's not, but it's like it's it's something I can get behind, and I've never been a very academic person, which is just uh trying to get to the truth and looking at the history and exposing it. I guess exposing what Israel is and what Zionism is. It is why I there is hope for the long future of the eventual fall of the Israeli state, and like however that happens or whatever that looks like, because the death of the Zionist project, because it's built on lies and misinformation. And that's what I think a lot of times drives me, is like, this is wrong, and I think it should be talked about, but it's also wrong in such a consequential way that an entire group of people is being wiped off the earth. And I appreciated what you said about calling it a genocide before October 7th, because not a lot of people did. But I mean, quite literally, the definition of genocide and the one who coined it was expressed in a character of colonization. It is ethnic cleansing, colonization, and this recent escalation is it's brought a lot of people to see that. But you know, it was it was in Herzl's books the whole time. It was just a matter of bringing them out and showing people and telling people, you know, they said they were going to do this. They said it over and over again. You can go through every Israeli leader and see the racist, just demonic stuff that they've said. But the thing is, you don't hear about it. And all it takes is people to hear about it to have like a rational position and say, I don't know, like, you're talking about changing people's minds. And it really rarely ever happens. I don't think it's ever happened in the history of like speech where someone confronts you in a debate and then you say, I was wrong, sorry, let's move on. Like, that's not a thing that happens, especially when there's financial, like, monetary incentives to not do that. But what do you think is the most like effective form of getting to change someone's minds on this? Like, I guess changing minds is, I don't know if that's vague of a topic, but like, I guess to bounce the question back to you, like, how do you think about it when you start, press record?
Yeah, it's a hard one. And as I'm getting older, like, I think when you're younger, and because we're a similar age, I'm guessing we'll probably feel similar about this. When I started YouTube, you have, and I think it's just with young people in general, you have delusions of grandeur of like, I myself do something. And I actually wanted to be a politician when I was younger. And like, then I thought about, like, I said this, I don't know if I said this in a video, it's not 2020. I said, someone told me I should run to be an MP. And I said, if I ran to be an MP, I would be destroyed by the Israel lobby in like 2 seconds, because they'd literally pull up a video. Because what I was saying back in like 2020 and 2021, stuff about genocide and everything, like, it's not like a mainstream position. Even with like left-wing YouTube, it wasn't mainstream. And like you were saying, the reason I was saying it was a genocide is that it's not like even with Ireland, which they wanted this class of workers. I mean, in some regards, Israel do want this class of like Arab Israeli / Palestinian workers to prop up the apartheid state. But it's not like South Africa. It's not like the English colonization of Ireland, where they want you alive. They just want to destroy your culture. Where with Palestine, it's like, no, they don't want you alive. They want you gone. Like, and they're gonna it's basically, they're putting you in this like Gaza open air prison until you snap, basically. And the conditions, that's what I was arguing in the video. The conditions there, this is like after the 2021 bombings, I was like, they're so terrible. The only point of that is to make it so untenable they either leave or die. And even if it's slow, they're still like, the war is on the Palestinian culture, like with the Irish culture, but it's the war on the people. But at the same time, I make those videos, doesn't really have an effect. Like, people subscribe to my channel, of course, like my channel grows. And the one thing I'll say, someone said in the chat, Hasan lost followers for his pro-Palestine content. One thing I'll say is consistency is sometimes good, because I only got more followers from talking about the Palestine stuff. So it's like, for me, it felt vindicating. But at the same time, it's like, what's the point in screaming the void for years? Like, no one listens. So in my head, I'm more like, it's more like a personal expression thing, a bit more for me, because obviously you have a far bigger platform, and I think you're well known, and I think that that's two things that aren't always the same. Like, I could have 500,000 subs. I don't think I would be as known as you. So I think with your content, it's a bit different, where you can think, all right, like, Hasan's going to watch this on stream. People are going to watch this, and I'm bringing all the facts, I'm bringing all the receipts. So I think with your content a bit more, I think you can view it as, I can change people's minds. And also, I think, not to like glaze you too much, I think just the way you present stuff, and just the way your channel is, I think is just more appealing. And I think you can maybe think that a bit more than myself. Where me, everyone knows I upload multiple times a week. It's not heavily research. I mean, a lot of it's off my head. I mean, I do research stuff, but like, it's not heavily scripted. It's just more disposable, I guess. So in my head, it's more like, I'm going to say this because it's right. And that's, I guess, for for me, it's more important to live my principles rather than thinking I'm going to change minds. Because especially in England, we are a very apolitical society, and I could talk to people about Israel, and they wouldn't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like, no one gives a shit in England. Like, frankly, no one cares about Palestine. No one cares about Israel. Obviously, we have a big Muslim population here. They do, of course, but like generally, society doesn't. So in my head, I'm more like, I'm just gonna do the right thing, and whether or not that changes people's minds, that's whatever. And people could judge me based on my content. I've never been one to chase like clout. I've never structured my channel to like grow. It's always been like I want to say what I want to say. So, but I think like everyone else has a different responsibility. So I don't want to make you feel bad about this, but I think now you've built this platform where you feel this responsibility to like raise all this money. Obviously, Hasan obviously has this platform now where he feels responsible to like change the conversation like nationally and change the conversation on Palestine. So I respect both. I respect all of that. But at the same time, I think for like maybe like me, Bad Empanada, there's no point like trying to be you and Hasan, because like there's just something about the way we even do things. It's just not as appealing. Maybe it's the way we present ourselves. I always think about like, why is this YouTuber big and why is this YouTuber not, when they're kind of the same? And I think there's just sometimes there's just a vibe people get, and they like you for it. And I think for whatever reason, I mean, I could say some obvious reasons, but you and Hasan are very likable. So I think people like listen to you more. And I think, yeah, I don't want to make you feel bad. So if you don't feel like this way, don't do it. But like, I think you and Hasan have more responsibility to try and package something to actually change someone's mind, more than me and someone like Bad Empanada, who kind of just say how we feel, and we don't really think about changing people's mind. I don't know what you think about that. Like, do you think some creators have more responsibility, or do we all have to be in it together? Like, because I don't think people's minds can be changed significantly with certain people. And I think in that, you did you moderate that like conversation between them? Because I watched a bit of that.
Kind of. I just sort of hung out and interjected.
Yeah,
but
well,
it was,
that's what
yeah.
Bad Empanada was saying. He's like, there's no point me being like you, because I don't think people are going to like me better if I try and be like you. So I maybe we all have our roles to play, and you and Hasan, I think, have a different role compared to some of the rest of us, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, it's like the medium is the message. It's a different type of content where
Yeah.
I've seen people comment either on your videos or when I've ever mentioned you in like a video or something, and they say like, this channel is the channel I look to for analysis on what's happening. Like, as it goes, you called them like more disposable videos, and maybe just because you upload more, you could describe it that way. And but you know, the actual information and continued education or like coverage is so far from disposable, because the viewers are going to take that information, and it doesn't have to be someone watching a video and saying, oh, this is unconvincing because it wasn't made well and perfectly argued. It could just be the person that is in the same vein of like politics as you, not hearing the singing in the choir, but like learning and seeing another example and another reason, another day where they are exposed to not like a vindication of their politics and an inspiration to continue like advocating for them. And even though, yeah, it's like consumption ultimately, like we are putting a product out. I don't think I've felt far more cynically in the past, but I think Palestine has galvanized my feelings to where like we are all in this together. It's just bigger than all of us, in the sense that this thing, regardless of how we do it or the reasons we do it, like you're saying, you just kind of mostly speak how you feel about it, and you speak from I don't know if it would be like a more a more like emotional or just visceral like approach, as opposed to someone sitting down and like, you know, building a big project up over time. But regardless of the reasons, the result and the contributions to this bigger project that we like at this time, it is easy to get focused on like, how can we change minds in the immediate, and how can I get someone to come and say, wow, I didn't think this but before, but now I think it. It's like, I think I've kind of moved away from or grown away from that that desire and that, like, like you said, the sort of naive, like, revolutionary, your contribution is going to mean something, or do something serious. And I think
Yeah.
the newer sort of thought on it is, it's going to do something, and we have no idea what it's going to do, but we know we're trying to advocate for what is right. And however that looks, people down the line, whatever happens in the future, will be able to say, like, oh yeah, my dad watched this YouTuber and he learned a lot about this thing, and now he's very, like, over time, he educated me about this. And that's another new generation of anti-Zionists that will have something to say when the next, I guess, when Israel does another fucking, it will carry on, and I understand what you mean about, like, the comparison between the content, because it's what's the word, I don't know, as a creator, as someone who watches other creators, you can't help but, like, compare yourself to them and think, oh, is this the right way to do things? And I know, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess, I forget where I was going with that, but yeah, for whatever it's worth, I think you do great work, and I think I've seen a lot of people say the same.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, and thanks for the very nice like compliments as well. But yeah, no, I feel the one thing I will say is, because I've been making videos so long, I like, even the amount of money you're raising right now is so fucking insane, and that obviously is a testament to something, that you're getting all these people on, which hopefully pulls in like their communities and everything, and you're raising all this money. And I remember when there was no left on YouTube, there was literally no one. Like, I'm trying to think of, like, you talk about early breadtube. There was like, yeah, these English political video essayists we've seen aren't really the most principled people going. They were just kind of like nerdy people who made fun videos from like a left of center perspective, and that was all there was. But now there's like so many different socialists. I mean, the one thing I will say, I haven't seen. I'm excited to see this. I want to see the next generation. Like, where are all the 18 and 19 and 20-year-old Marxists? I'm not talking about those horrible TikTokers who are involved with the Democratic Party. My sister actually sent me one recently and said, who's the blonde one? Dean something?
Dean Withers.
Yeah, my sister sent me that, and she was like, why don't you like him? My sister's 23. And I was like, I'm going to have to sit you down and explain why I don't like him, because on the surface, to someone who's not that political, they see that and they think he's great.
Yeah.
Like, look at him debate all these conservatives. And I'm like, no, like, he's not great, but I'm going to have a big conversation about this. But that's what I mean. Like, I'm excited, like you were saying, like someone's dad, like growing up, and like you might have, older people now who've watched this. I'm excited for the next generation. I want to see Hasan be dethroned by someone who's like 23. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see the next big thing, who's even bigger than him. And I hope, like, that will be like a sort of sign that things are really changing. But it's a sign things are changing. Like, did FD just hit 1 million subs? Like,
Yeah.
I know it's a video essay channel, so it does have that broader appeal, but that's like a big deal. Like, obviously yourself, 500k. Hasan is absolutely huge at the moment, so it's a good thing. And hopefully we'll just have more and more people coming out. That it is depressing, because we have like this massive rise of fascism, fascist content creators. It feels like everyone's just a fucking Nazi now, and that is the sad part. But then I'm hoping to counter that, we do have this rise in left wing, which just didn't exist. But then that's the nice thing. It has been nice to see all these people like blow up, or just like like yourself. I remember when you just suddenly like blew up like one day, and I was just like, who the fuck is this person who's just randomly come out of nowhere and now has like 100k subs or something? Like, I want that to happen more, where I'm just like who is this person that suddenly I haven't even heard of them? They have 200,000 from like 3 videos or something. So there's causes for optimism, and maybe one day when I'm dead, there'll be like a little history book, and it'll be like Noah Samsen like 4th, and then the Kavernacle down at like 25th, and it'll be like, these are like the original like left wing movement or
The
founders or
founding
something on
fathers of
YouTube.
YouTube leftism. Oh God, we get a
But like you're
statue.
saying, you do have to take it seriously in that regard. That like, no matter how silly or like throwaway you might even see your own videos, I know I do sometimes. Um, it does actually influence how people think, even if that's a small amount of people. So you could be a bit optimistic that you know, and also with a lot of Marxism and socialism, we understand we're not going to build it in our lifetimes. Like, I don't think I'm going to live in a communist country. I don't think I'm going to live in a socialist like utopia. I don't even think like my grandkids would. But you don't do things now because you think you're going to get a reward straight away. So maybe even just like sowing the seeds of something online, as silly as it sounds, is actually like a useful thing to do, like with your career and with your time and stuff. So again, Hasan, like you can have your problems with him. I've criticized him a lot in the past, like good faith. Like I don't think he's a bad guy, but like criticize certain things to do with him. But like that's just a good thing to have, rather than like, you know, someone like Vosh or something for ages was the main representative of like left wing people on the internet. I'm like, now we have someone who's just like far better, and then we have like the other tier like yourself and FD like just behind him. So I think it's time to be optimistic for the online left, but yeah, like with everything else, it's quite bleak. But that's the silver lining, I'd say.
Yeah, you bring up like Vosh versus like the comparison with Vosh and Hasan, and I think I when I went to debate Vosh, I feel like what happened there and how I approached it is almost similar to what happened with Hasan debating Ethan, where I think the
Yeah,
common thread with someone like Hasan, myself, and like FD and you is there's a level of like intellectual curiosity or empathy that isn't present for people that are built up in these spaces that are strictly based on conflict or are being influenced
yeah,
by those very people. And I think that sort of genuine, like, I don't know, I was researching for that video in October and I'm going back on Hassan's Twitter feed and he's talking about the genocide in Yemen 10 years ago. And it's
yeah,
like that you don't see any of these people doing that. There's a genuine, I think, like, say what you will about him, criticize him as you will, there's a genuine desire to, alleviate suffering and help people and highlight America's atrocities or talk about these issues that are now in the mainstream and in the fold, at least on the internet,
yeah,
that you don't see from a lot of these other people. And I mean, same with Bad and Banana. Like, you see videos about Israel Palestine for years and years and years before, and an anti imperialism years and years before October 7th, and having people like that, I wouldn't call him necessarily empathetic, but not that he's, he does some stuff online that we I don't know if you watched the conversation with it. It was a long conversation with him and Hassan, but
I
it's just
watched like an
funny that,
hour, so yeah,
yeah, they're different approaches, but it's a still a same thing where you leave that experience being like, maybe I lost, but I feel like over time people will be able to see why what happened here wasn't yeah, I guess there's a reason they are outlasted in terms of the content world, which is that um they want what's best for people and they're consistent on that. And if that doesn't waver, like whenever I watch people attack Hassan for these stupid petty things, I'm like, no, I mean, he's going to be fine. Like, he's going to keep growing, he's going to keep maintaining an audience because, you know it does appear in all ways and historically that he cares about this stuff. And that's the
yeah,
difference, I suppose. And that's what'll outlast, like you're saying, like um uh whatever our contributions are and our contributions to the future. That it'll hopefully be, consequential in some small way.
yeah. No, you're having Big Joel on, so I don't want to take like too much of your time. But I'd say as
Oh,
a final
true.
point
Yeah.
from me, because I just realized the time. The final point for me is just like when like you're looking for like left wing like YouTubers, and what we're saying here, like with Bad Empanada and Hassan, there's obviously like I have obviously like problems with obviously Bad Empanada's certain social media feeds, which I can't even tell if it's him all the time or if it's like a troll account. But it's like, yeah, like when I watch that debate, Bad Empanada's obviously made a lot of videos criticizing other leftists and stuff. But like you were saying, it's more like they agree on stuff, they disagree, and it's not like hostile. It's more like, I think this is worthless, but it's your life, do whatever. Well, like you're saying with you and Vosh, like it's literally all about content farming and trying to make you look like the worst person ever. Like I've had this as well. Like the Vanguard, I criticized very lightly for misogyny, and the response that they gave me was insane. Like they were just like roasting my accent. They were calling me like a liberal. Didn't know anything about me, and they didn't watch the whole video. They only watched a little bit about them. And I was like, that reminds me, like, certain people just don't want to have the dialogue. Where, like, I'm sure, not that I know what we specifically disagree on, but I'm sure if we had a major disagreement, me and you, or me and a lot of people, like in a certain element of the left wing YouTube, we'd sort it out and discuss it without just resorting to personal attacks and like making it into some sort of like bullshit drama. And I think you'll just, if people consume this content, you just have to be aware of the people who do stuff like that and the people who don't. And I think it's very obvious, but like it's slop at the end of the day. And I think also certain channels like the Lolicon Enjoyer and stuff, they make content in a way that is very similar to like Asmongold. And I would say these people have more in common than you'd think. And it's not just because, you know, I don't think they agree politically, but the way they dehumanize people for content and just the most bad fate. Like, I'm sure you were called like some sort of anti-white racist or some shit, like for defending Professor Flowers, right?
Yeah, white
It's
genocide.
yeah,
Enjoyer.
it's absolutely insane from a guy who doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, but he now has legions of fans who will harass you for that without giving you any like no charitability. Even if you're wrong, it's like, okay, if he's wrong, let's just discuss why he's wrong rather than like simp, like white genocide, all this bullshit. So that's why my ending point is you can easily tell, and just don't reward certain left wing creators with your views and memberships and Patreons when they just churn out like drama slop, and there's plenty of them. So I would say, you know, left wing YouTube is probably in a really good place right now generally, but there's still certain channels I'm not too fond of, let's just say, but people can do what they want.
Yeah, I mean, just last thing, I'm glad you came on, and I'm glad, I think there's been a few moments in the past since I've done this stream where I'm like, oh, we're all saying the same thing, but we don't make videos about this because that would be doing exactly what they do when they make videos talking shit about creators or trying to attack people and own
Yeah.
them. And so I don't know. I hope we can talk again, and I hope we can, I don't know, we charity streams or whatever else can happen more, because I think it's helpful also for the audience. It seems like just being able to connect on this common ground, and like you said, hash out a disagreement in a way that, like, I don't know, when I was watching the Vanapanan and Hasan talk on my stream, I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, this, he's made videos about him, but ultimately they agree on most things, and it's not like a, you know, the motion people go through after debate where they're like, oh, that was, you know, excellent disagreements and like rational
Yeah.
discourse, and I thank you for coming on, where they're just like, oh, we both made a bunch of money and who cares about what happened. No, it's like genuine politics and genuine discussion about things that are important to all of us, and if they're not, you know, talking about it can make it that way. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on. I think this was